Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of Jonestown, what the 918 victims' final hours reveal about mass compliance. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. On the afternoon of November 18, 1978, in a jungle clearing in Guyana, 918 people died within a few hours. 276 of them were children. It remains the deadliest mass death of American civilians in history until September 11, 2001. The event has been reduced in popular memory to a punchline: drinking the Kool-Aid, a phrase implying voluntary, credulous mass suicide by true believers. The actual record, preserved in over 900 audio recordings recovered from the site and in survivor testimony and forensic evidence, describes something more complex and more disturbing. Many people in Jonestown that afternoon did not want to die. Voices on the FBI's recovered recordings object, argue, and weep. Forensic analysis found injection marks on bodies inconsistent with voluntary ingestion. Guards with weapons surrounded the pavilion. The children had no choice at all. Jonestown was not a mass suicide. It was, for a significant proportion of its victims, a mass murder carried out by a man whose organization had spent years perfecting the mechanisms of total control. Understanding how that control was built is not an academic question. It is a practical one. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the world of history's most enduring unsolved crimes, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Every unsolved crime is a failure, not just of the investigation, but of memory itself. The witness who might have placed the suspect at the scene has died. The physical evidence has degraded or been lost in a storage room. The lead detective retired 30 years ago. The files exist, but the institutional knowledge that made them legible is gone. Cold cases are, in a very literal sense, history events that have receded from the living present into the documentary past, accessible now only through records, artifacts, and the unreliable memories of survivors. And yet cold cases do get solved. The history of forensic science is partly a history of cold case resolution. Cases that sat dormant for decades until a new technology, DNA profiling, digital facial recognition, isotope ratio analysis, genealogical databases, provided the key that previous generations lacked. The Golden State Killer was identified 50 years after his first known crime by genealogical DNA matching. Multiple historic murders have been solved through mitochondrial DNA extracted from hair samples thought to be too old and degraded to yield any useful information. The past is not as sealed as it seems. What cold cases teach us about crime is often as important as solving them. They expose the limitations of investigative practice at their time, the tunnel vision that focused on the wrong suspect, the forensic contamination that destroyed evidence, the jurisdictional rivalry that prevented agencies from sharing information. Examining cold cases is an act of institutional self-examination, an attempt to learn, across decades, from the failures that allowed the perpetrator to walk free. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Jonestown, what the 918 victims' final hours reveal about mass compliance, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Jim Jones founded People's Temple in Indianapolis in 1955, initially attracting members through faith healing and a message of racial integration that was genuinely radical for 1950s Indiana. The organization moved to California in the 1960s and grew to several thousand members in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Jones cultivated political relationships with California's most senior politicians. The Jonestown Agricultural Project in Guyana was established in 1974, partly to create an isolated community beyond the reach of American investigative journalism. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Congressman Leo Ryan flew to Jonestown on November 17, 1978, after family members of residents raised concerns with his office about conditions in the settlement. Ryan's delegation included journalists and relatives of members. Several Jonestown residents asked to leave with Ryan's group. As the delegation departed at the Port Kairuma airstrip on November 18, Jonestown security guards opened fire. Ryan and 4 others were killed. Ryan became the only U.S. congressman killed in the line of duty in American history. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine 918 people died at Jonestown on November 18, 1978. The official cause was cyanide poisoning mixed into flavor aid, not Kool-Aid, a misattribution that has persisted for nearly 50 years. Jim Jones died of a gunshot wound to the head, almost certainly self-inflicted. An additional 4 people died in a Jonestown-linked murder in Georgetown, Guyana. The 276 children who died had no agency in the decision. Their deaths are the most morally unambiguous aspect of an event, often framed as voluntary. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Jones conducted White Night rehearsals, mass drills in which members were assembled at night and ordered to drink what they were told was poison. Survivors described the terror of these rehearsals and Jones's announcement afterward that it was a test of their loyalty. The rehearsals were documented in testimony and in Jones's own recordings. Psychologists who study the event cite the White Nights as a systematic process of desensitization. Each rehearsal made the actual event more conceivable and reduced the psychological barrier to compliance. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the FBI recovered over 900 audio recordings from Jonestown. The most significant, known as the death tape, recording Q042, captured the final 44 minutes of the community's life. Jones is heard urging compliance. Multiple voices are heard arguing against the death. A woman named Christine Miller debates Jones directly, arguing the community should go to the Soviet Union instead of dying. Children can be heard crying. Jones's responses reveal a man in advanced cognitive and emotional deterioration from years of drug abuse. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Forensic analysis of the bodies found evidence of coercion among a significant subset of the dead. Approximately 70 to 80 bodies showed injection marks, cyanide administered by needle, not ingested voluntarily in the punch. Jonestown was surrounded by armed guards during the final event. Survivors who escaped into the jungle described seeing guards with weapons and people being restrained. The characterization of the event as entirely voluntary mass suicide is contradicted by the forensic and testimonial record. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Jonestown, what the 918 victims' final hours reveal about mass compliance. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Jones exercised total psychological control through systematic isolation, sleep deprivation, food control, confession sessions, and the White Night rehearsals. The cult psychology framework, developed by Robert Lifton and applied to Jonestown by dozens of subsequent researchers. On this model, many members were not making a free choice on November 18. They were acting within a system of control that had over years eliminated the psychological resources needed to refuse. Coercion was structural and cumulative, not only physical on the final day. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that a significant proportion of members willingly chose to die, motivated by genuine belief in Jones's ideology, despair at the prospect of return to a racist America, loyalty to their community, and the conviction reinforced, said by Jones, that the alternative was torture and humiliation by American forces. Survivor Laura Johnston Cole and others have described members who went to their deaths in a spirit of defiant solidarity rather than terror. This does not contradict the coercion evidence, but complicates a simple murder narrative. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that Jones's decision was driven primarily by his advanced drug addiction and paranoid deterioration rather than coherent ideology. By 1978, he was consuming pentobarbital and methamphetamine in quantities that profoundly affected his judgment. Recordings from Jonestown in the months before the final event document a man increasingly delusional and disconnected from the welfare of his community. On this reading, 918 people died because one severely impaired man had constructed a system with no mechanism to remove him from power. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree, that is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Jonestown, what the 918 victims' final hours reveal about mass compliance, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the death tape, Q042, is the most important primary source. 44 minutes of audio capturing the event in real time. Jones speaking, Christine Miller arguing against the plan, children crying, and the sounds of mass death. The tape contradicts the simple voluntary suicide narrative, multiple voices object, and Jones's responses show him dismissing objections rather than persuading. The tape is publicly available at archive.org and has been analyzed by historians, psychologists, and journalists since its release. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. Forensic analysis found approximately 70 to 80 injection marks on bodies, cyanide administered by needle rather than consumed voluntarily. The distribution of injection marks and the physical positions of bodies suggested that some members were held down or injected while incapacitated. Combined with survivor testimony describing armed guards and coercion, the forensic evidence establishes that the event was not uniformly voluntary and that murder was a component alongside whatever compliance had been achieved through years of psychological conditioning. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. The White Night rehearsal testimony from survivors is extensively documented in multiple independent accounts and in Jones's own recordings. Robert Lifton's model of thought reform, milieu control, mystical manipulation, demand for purity, confession, sacred science, loading the language, doctrine over person, dispensing of existence, maps onto the Jonestown environment in comprehensive detail. The rehearsals specifically are identified by psychologists as the mechanism that made the actual event achievable. Normalization of the concept of mass death through repetition reduced the psychological resistance of members who might otherwise have fled. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Jonestown, what the 918 victims' final hours reveal about mass compliance. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The FBI's Jonestown recordings are available at archive.org. Jeff Gins's The Road to Jonestown, 2017, is the definitive biography of Jim Jones. Julia Shear's 1,000 Lives, 2011, reconstructs the individual stories of members. The event is studied in every course on cult psychology and remains the paradigm case for understanding how total control environments operate. The 276 children killed remain the most morally unambiguous aspect of the event and the hardest to reconcile with any framing that emphasizes voluntary compliance. The phrase "drinking the Kool-Aid," a misattribution that erases the coercion and the children, is one of the more consequential inaccuracies in American popular memory. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Jonestown, what the 918 victims' final hours reveal about mass compliance, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Jonestown ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.